Here, Haj Amin writes to the Bulgarian foreign minister about the same matter of the 4,000 Jewish children, about whom Sir Oliver Stanley had announced in Parliament that the British government was prepared to give them certificates for Palestine. And the Grand Mufti goes on. The permission for the exit of these Jews from their present country of residence in this fashion, this will not solve the Jewish problem and will not save the country whence they are coming. On the contrary, their departure in this way will enable them to get freely in touch with members of their race in enemy countries, and they will have the opportunity of going to Palestine and to other countries in the Middle East. And now the third passage on the second page. Also, the remaining of these Jews since the outbreak of the war and until this time, and in other countries too, this has made it possible for them, their stay in these countries has made it possible for them to learn details about your war effort and to set up dangerous espionage networks which will work for the enemy now. And in addition to what has been said before, that the departure of Jews from the Balkan and their tendency, their hostility toward Palestine and their emigration to Palestine could cause grave danger to the Arab population, which loyally supports the Axis country and their allies, and the Arabs who so fervently wish success for the Axis. And what does Haj Amin desire? He says, I should like to be permitted to draw your attention to the urgent need to act for the prevention of the departure of those Jews to Palestine. The correct solution for their problem is that they should leave your country and go somewhere else, or should be under strong and energetic guard, for instance in Poland, in order to guard against the danger which they represent and to diminish the danger which they create. Thus you will render a great service to your own country, and the Arab nation will appreciate your activity and will return friendship. This, the Mufti says, the dispatch of Jews from Bulgaria to extermination in Poland, this will increase the friendship between the Mufti and the Bulgarian nation. Judge Halevi, he does not say extermination, Mr. Hausner, but it's quite clear, sir, President of Court. He says under strict guard. Judge Halevi, it depends on the date. If it's the 6th of May, 1943, Mr. Hausner, yes, people who knew the German ins and outs knew very well what it meant to send Jews to Poland on the 6th of May, 1943. Now our document 1312
is a copy which was found in the same archives of a letter to the Foreign Minister of Romania. He seems to be active on all fronts. He does not satisfy himself with referring to Ribbentrop, but also to the countries of origin where the Jews are found. He already referred to Bulgaria, and now he writes to the Foreign Minister in Romania. Again, on the same subject, the Jews wish to come out to Palestine. The Jewish Agency obtained certificates for 1,800 Jewish children, accompanied by 200 adults, and for their exit from Romania. Haj Amin concludes, that is why I pray that Your Excellency permit me to call your attention to the necessity to avoid the leaving of the Jews, to their leaving your country on the way to Palestine. If there are reasons to do something to have the Jews out of your country, they should be sent to a country where they can be watched actively all the time, like Poland, for instance, and thus avoid any danger or damage they are likely to cause.
Our number 1308 now. This is a memorandum from the German Foreign Ministry, according to which the Italian legation counselor in Berlin reported about the Mufti's interventions with the Italian foreign minister to prevent the immigration of 4,500 Bulgarian Jewish children to Palestine. The Mufti requests action to prevent this immigration, and he had informed the Italians that he is also applying to the governments of Germany and Bulgaria. The court will note that the Mufti was in Rome at that time, and some of the letters I have shown you under his signature were actually written in Rome. This is Exhibit 1265, says the President of the Court. And it is not in vain that this man went to look for his own kind. There was a reason for that. Now, our number 1302. This is a joint letter of Haj Amin al-Husseini and Rashid Ali al-Qailani from Rome. It is addressed to the Foreign Minister of the Reich von Ribbentrop. On the 28th of April 1942, these two Arab leaders declare, Mr. Reichsminister, in our conversations with you, we have expressed the confidence of the Arab nation in the Axis powers and in their noble objectives, and the national objectives of the Arab countries in the Middle East, which are currently oppressed by the British. We have proclaimed the willingness of the Arab nation to take part in the war against the common enemy to the final victory. We therefore now request that the German government proclaim its willingness to confer on the Arab countries which are now being oppressed by the British any kind of help possible in their war for liberation, to recognize their sovereignty and independence, the sovereignty and independence of the Arab countries in the Middle East which are currently oppressed by the British, and to permit the association of the people of these countries who will together try to liquidate the Jewish national home in Palestine. It has been agreed that the text and contents of this letter will be kept secret unless it is otherwise decided by both sides. Mr. Reichsminister, please accept an expression of our extraordinary appreciation, signed Amin al-Husseini, Rashid al-Qailani. And as I've said before, it is not in vain that birds of a feather flock together.
T1266. The diary of Haj Amin al-Husseini was also amongst the documents which fell into the hands of the Allies, and Mr. Arazi confirms this document as well. Our number 1306 is a note made in the Mufti's diary on a page dated 9/11/44. There are 6 words. Only 3 we succeeded in deciphering. They are in the Arabic. These 3 words say, the best of the friends of the Arab people
President of Court, where is this on the document?
It is in the right-hand column at the top of the page. 9/11, 22 Zil Hajj, the Arabic date, Thursday. The best friend of the Arabs, and underneath in Latin characters, Eichmann. President of Court, I wish to see the Arab words. 6 words in the Arabic in the right-hand column in our document 1306. I can read only the word Al-Arab, the Arabs. This was deciphered by Mr. Ben El-Kanna. We request that someone come here and show it to us because the court can read Arabic.
Mr. Hausner, this is Mr. Ben El-Kanna. He will point to the court what he has translated and deciphered from the Arabic here. The President of Court has earlier pointed out that all 3 judges read Arabic, and if it is pointed out to them, they can understand what is written. The Arabic interpreter is now pointing the passage out to the President of the Court.
Ashab is the word friend.
President of Court, you translated this. You are not the expert on the contents.
You did not do the deciphering yourself, did you? No. Only a translation of the Arabic.
The President of the Court argues a point of Arabic spelling with the interpreter. President of the Court wishes to know whether...
Attorney General, Judge Halevi, the best friend of the Arabs is not so clear. Khair is good. The only thing which is clear is Al-Arab. Al-Arab, which means the Arabs.
Eichmann is also, of course, clear here. The word
Yes,
Eichmann is quite clear.
This is in the Latin characters. Attorney General, we shall request the court to admit this document for the time being as is.
President of Court, with all due respect to the expert, he was born in Austria. Perhaps you could find an expert who was born in Jerusalem or in Iraq.
Halevi, do you contend that this is Eichmann's signature?
Mr. Hausner, no, not at all. This was written down by the Mufti in his diary. Judge Halevi, but the word Eichmann is in Latin characters. Who wrote the word Eichmann? Mr. Hausner, I do not know, sir. This is how we found it. We do not know who put it down there.
Ich habe Bedenken, dass dieses Wort Eichmann von Mufti selbst geschrieben ist und habe den Verdacht, dass es irgendwie später von einem anderen geschrieben ist. Schon der äußere Vergleich mit den anderen Notizen in lateinischer Sprache ergibt, dass es eine andere Handschrift ist als bei den anderen Notizen. Wenn man also in dem Wort Eichmann das CH vergleicht mit der Notiz unter dem 10. November, wo Buchberg steht, dann sieht man schon, dass dieses CH ein ganz anderes ist, das also nicht die gleiche Handschrift sein kann. Es müsste also durch einen Schriftsachverständigen zunächst einmal festgestellt werden, ob es tatsächlich diese Unterschrift ist.
Dr. Savatius, Mr. President of Court, I have grave apprehensions about the name Eichmann written here, whether it was written down by the Mufti himself or by someone later on. This is, I suspect, someone added this later on. And I base this suspicion on a comparison with the other notations in Latin characters in the same diary. These are obviously in another handwriting. I wish to point to the letter CH in the name Eichmann and compare this with a notation this on the same page from the 10th of November, where in the name Buchberg there is another form of the letters CH. I think a graphological expert would have had to appear here to tell us whether this is the same handwriting. President of Court, we shall admit the document for whatever it may be worth.
Judge Halevi, that in the Mufti's diary on a certain date the name Eichmann is mentioned. We shall see.
President of Court, this will be Exhibit T1267.
If the accused wishes to deny those friendly relations, maybe he will succeed in doing so. President of Court, but if you wish to make an effort and decipher this Arab writing, you can do so. I believe that the police expert will be able to decipher the Arab characters. Attorney General, he could not come to a conclusion in regard to who wrote the word Eichmann. If this was the Mufti or someone else, he does not have a final conclusion, but we can ask him to try once again. And
Judge Halevi, certainly the accused himself did not write this.
We do not say so.
Dieser Kalenderzettel ist, es scheint 1944 zu sein. Ja.
Dr. Savatius, Mr. President of Court, it does not transpire clearly what the year is of this page from the diary, from the calendar rather. It seems to be 1944. Mr. Hausner, yes, 1944. Dr. Savatius, thank you.
President of Court, yes, of course. By comparing the Arab date with the Gregorian calendar, one can also know that this 44.
Mr. Hausner, another entry from the Mufti's diary from the 24th of March 1944, the Arab month of Al-Awwal. I have two entries from the diary from that date. It says, the expert dealing with Jewish problems, I should like to have contact with this man. The Arabic date is Rabiul Awwal, the Arab month Rabiul Awwal. And Mr. Hausner, and it says further on, Al-Mukhtathaf, Mukhtathaf. President of Court reading the Arabic, Bil Shu'un al-Arabiya, al-Yahudiya, rather. I cannot decipher the rest. The translation, Mr. Hausner, as Superintendent Chagag translated it. The translator says that the Mufti wanted a meeting with this Jewish affairs expert in Germany. And then we have the words, the bombing of Tel Aviv and the Dead Sea. Then a word which cannot be deciphered again. And then the word Haifa and the enterprises in that city. President of Court again reading out a passage in Arabic.
The military.
President of Court, this I managed to decipher.
Al-Harbiyya is the war enterprises working for the war effort. The word Al-Harb means war, and Al-Harbiyya.
Mr. Hausner, thank you, Your Honor. Then it says we can conduct these operations all over Palestine. President of Court again reading out in the Arabic. President of Court, with some effort, I think even the other sentences can be deciphered. I can see the word Palestine here. Anyway, this is Exhibit T1267. Mr. Hausner, now Your Honors, our document 1304. It is a photostatic copy of the Mufti's diary of the 29th of September 1943. On page 5 it says subject, the Jews in Italy, France and Hungary. And who the expert in charge of Jewish affairs there is. Number 6 on the same date, Kaltenbrunner and the meeting with him on Jewish subjects. The Reichsführer Heinrich Himmler has given His Eminence, the Grand Mufti, as a souvenir their joint photograph.
This is 1269.
It is Exhibit T1269. Judge Halevi, March 1943 is the date? Mr. Hausner, yes. Mr. Hausner, another picture of the two men, Himmler and Haj Amin, sitting, both of them together.
T1271.
Judge Ali.
You want to affirm and not to testify under oath, President of Court. Why not under oath and why an affirmation? I can do things only in which I believe wholeheartedly.
Quiet, please. Say, I affirm
that my testimony in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
What is your full name?
My name is Yisrael Gutman,
G-U-T-M-A-N. You are a member of the kibbutz Lavota Machan in Upper Galilee.
Yes, ever since I came.
You can be seated if you so wish, if it's easier for you to give testimony that way. Also in the course of your testimony, you can be seated. You were active in the uprising of the Warsaw Ghetto, and after the suppression of the ghetto, you were taken from your bunker wounded.
Yes, I was a member of the underground in the Warsaw Ghetto. I came out after this uprising was suppressed in 1943.
What made you leave the bunker?
I was wounded, and I was lying in one of the bunkers, which was taken. There was a doctor there as well. They discovered the bunker and had chlor poison put into the bunker. I did not feel how and when I left the bunker. All those who came out of the bunker were already poisoned with this gas.
And then you were brought to the collection square, the Umschlagplatz in Warsaw.
I was taken through the streets of Warsaw for the last time. I saw Warsaw destroyed. I saw corpses. I saw the ruined houses. And I was taken to the Umschlagplatz. This not for the first time.
A carriage you were standing there, I understand.
Yes, there were carriages in waiting. We were taken onto the carriages immediately and the train moved off.
How many people were you in that transport?
I cannot say, I do not know the figures, but all I can say is that one could not stand in those cars.
Why?
Because we were crammed and overcrowded to such an extent that this was one mess of people. And when families lost a member of the family in this crowd, there was no possibility of finding them once again.
Where the train come to?
We thought the train was being taken to Treblinki, but the train reached Majdanek. We were told later by veteran inmates of Majdanek that they could not take in all the victims in Treblinki, and that is why a part of those transportations were sent to Majdanek.
Could you tell the court what happened when you arrived at Majdanek camp?
When we arrived, they were waiting.
Who were they?
The SS men. They lined us up in 5 groups of 5, screaming and beating us with their whips. They started to make us run towards the camp. We walked from the railway station in Lublin to the gates of the camp.
How long did it take you to reach the camp from the Lublin station?
I cannot say. When we arrived to the gates of Majdanek, we were ordered, we were told that we may lie down on the grass We did not know where we were, and we were lying there for hours. Then it was late in the afternoon, it began to become dark already, and then we were taken to the baths. I did not know at the time, I did not believe that this was really a public bath, but the man who shaved my head in this public bath told me that people were spared here, but they cannot say for how long. And when I came out, I could see that many of those who came with me were not there any longer. I did not know that a selection was going on, but after that I went through a number of selections, and after I saw and realized that this was in the classical Nazi style.
Mr. Gutman, where did you live in Majdanek?
Majdanek at the time when we arrived in May 43 was divided into 5 fields.
Fields?
Yes, it was called fields. They were separate fields, and each field was a camp in itself. There were authorities and administration, and the rule was even separate for each field. I was taken to
How is
field
it
number
called
4.
in German?
Feld.
Sade.
Feld. Field. This was field number 4. I was told later and learned that this was the worst field at Majdanek. This field was opened when we came. The field was empty until our arrival. We were taken in. The field was constructed in a way that in the middle there was a large roll call ground, a parade ground with huts. Along both sides they were stables, and the stables were where we were
What was
housed.
written on these huts?
They had the inscription, the writing on those tables, that each stable was to include 52 horses. As far as I remember, I cannot be sure 100%, but we were some 800 men to each hut. The hut I was in, hut number 18, there were 22 such huts in this field. Only in one field there were already veteran internees. They were there to take us in, to introduce us to this way of life of the camp. A way of life we call the SS regime, a kind and way of life prepared by the SS for human beings.
Mr. Gutman, I understand it's very difficult for you to speak about it, but it will be much easier for us if you could confine yourself to answering my questions. There were some stories, as it were, in one hut.
The beds we had were 3 stories, 3 bunks. I can imagine that it was some 80 centimeters wide, the bunk, or maybe 60.
For one person?
This was for one person, formally maybe.
But actually?
When we were there, many transports arrived, and they made us share a bunk. Every 2 people had to share one such bunk.
I see. How was work in Majdanek?
The order of the day was we were woken at 4:30 in the morning, every morning, and then there was the roll call. If this went over smoothly, everybody was present. There were any dead or sick, wounded, They were to be dragged from the block and to be placed near those taking part in the roll call so that the number be full, that everybody is present. If the number was correct, everybody was present, work would begin.
What was the work like?
There was no work for us at Majdanek at the time. Therefore, they sought to employ us, to keep us busy. And maybe they considered it work. We would wheel stones from one place to another. We were divided into groups. One group would take the stones in one direction. Another group would break them up. And a third group would pave a way with this crushed stone. The lot of those who paved this path, their lot was the best. This had to be done whilst running. They had to hold the crushed stones in the folds of their clothes, and they would search and see if we took enough to carry with us. And this had to be done while we were on the run. This was the work. I did not do this kind of work for a long time. They gave us wooden clogs instead of shoes. There was a strip of cloth 1.5 centimeters wide or 1 centimeter, and this was a treasure. I did not know at the time. One of the first nights of my stay in Majdanek, one of those wooden clogs was stolen, and I had to appear at 4:30 to the roll calls, and it was very cold. I had to stand 1 foot bare. After a few days, I ran a high fever and fainted in the morning. I was dragged by my comrades to the sick roll, and I knew.
What is the meaning of the word revere?
Revere was what should have been a hospital, but of course we called it in the camp. We called it revere in the camp.
How long were you there?
I contracted pneumonia in the camp with complications and poison gas. I was not the only one down with this sickness.
What you mean, you're referring to the chloride poisoning?
Yes, the chloride poisoning in the bunker. I was not the only one to be taken ill with the sickness, but very many of those who came with me on the same transport were sick. And generally, all of my acquaintances, my friends, died. I was lucky. A doctor who happened to examine me found splinters of a grenade. He saw the wound under my eye and decided that I was to be given medicine. Jews did not receive medicine at Majdanek. I wish to say that I was told that I was a very lucky man, because until a very short time before I arrived at Majdanek, Jews were not accepted in this hospital. A sick Jew was shot dead. And this liberal system of Jews being admitted to hospital was a new regulation.
Mr. Gutman, when you were in the hospital, did you see people marched into the gas chambers?
Yes, once only. I heard a noise, and he who could stand on his own feet jumped from his bed towards the windows. All this took only a few seconds because we were driven back from the windows and not allowed to look. I saw the march of naked people. I saw amongst them a boy. I do not know how old he was, about 10 years of age. I saw that the boy had in his hand, in his arms, a smaller child. And I saw two SS men, one pointing out to the other the picture and laughing. I want to say that there were such moments when I tried to look into their eyes stealthily, because a direct gaze was too dangerous. I wanted to see in their eyes if there is no expression of a self-struggle, a spark of humanity in those eyes. I always met the same gaze. When we were sad and grieving, they were happy. Whenever they could torture us, they laughed. They were drunk with blood.
When you left the hospital, Mr. Gutman, you were, of course, in a critical physical condition.
Yes. I was told by a Slovakian Jew. The first Jews who came to Majdanek were Jews from Slovakia and Czechoslovakia. When I was there, they said that when they came, they were 10,000. Some 100 or 200
Mr. Gutman,
remained.
Please answer the questions. What happened to the others?
The others, or either they died, and when they became weak, they were taken to the gas chambers, they were shot dead, and the Stubendienste, the one in the infirmary, told me that it was preferable that I leave when the temperature came down.
Now tell me, Mr. Gutman, please. You met the Dr. Yitzhak Schiffer, didn't you?
Yes.
This was a well-known Jewish historian. In what condition did you find him?
I saw Yitzhak Schiffer when I came back from hospital.
Could you tell us in a few words what happened?
I saw him sitting near the kitchen, peeling potatoes, rotten potatoes, or beetroot. I came up to him and reminded him that in the ghetto, when I was listening to Torah, which he was reciting to us, and he told me that since he was allowed to sit there near the kitchen to do something whilst he was sitting, because he felt that if he were forced to stand on his feet, this would be his last day.
Were there any latrines in Majdanek?
Yes. This was one of those things of continuous fear. This would begin at night. At Majdanek, there was only one place which was called the latrines. Only one. And the only place where there was water. We had to get up at the sound of the gong and run as fast as we could to be able to come to the latrines before the others, including the prisoners, the veteran prisoners.
Why did you have to run?
Because otherwise they would start torturing the Jews. The non-Jewish prisoners who were held in the camp, and Jews amongst them, who were capos in the camp.
Perhaps you'd like to sit down. The court allowed you to be seated. The judge, yes, of course. I told the witness what is important is your testimony and not the position in which you're testifying. You can certainly be seated. They were torturing you then. They were beating you with whips, I understand.
Yes, I did not encounter this treatment in any camp after Majdanek. They had whips with them. They were made of an iron rod of plated leather. This was in the hands of the SS men and the capos. And they would use those whips as often as they could.
Who were these prisoners in Majdanek who were actually in charge of you? Who were the capos?
Most of them were criminals, German. It seems that they were habitual criminals, and because they tortured the prisoners, they were given certain privileges in the camp.
Mr. Gutman, please. I understand that afterwards an announcement was published that those who wanted to leave the place may be transferred to another camp.
No, this was not this was only a rumor that a commission arrived and was trying to get those fit for work. They will be transported to another place where they will be employed.
And you felt that in Majdanek you couldn't hold out any longer?
I felt this, and all those who came with me on those transports felt the same.
Then I understand you volunteered to be transferred to another place.
I did not volunteer. We were not asked. We were called to the roll call naked, and they selected people. But we knew that this was not a selection in the regular meaning, because they really picked out the healthier amongst us, the sturdier ones, who had a little flesh on their bones.
3 times you were not selected, I understand.
I tried to pass this selection 3 times.
And the first time you managed somehow or rather to sneak your way into that
Yes,
group.
during one night I succeeded with one of my friends, and I went into the block from where the people were taken to this camp.
And that transport went to Birkenau, I understand.
This transport came to Auschwitz A, the Stammlager.
You were not in Birkenau, you were in Auschwitz.
Yes, I was at Auschwitz A, as it was known at the time.
I'm not going to ask you questions about Auschwitz, about life in Auschwitz, because you'll have other witnesses testifying thereon. But I should like to ask you a number of questions which we couldn't possibly get from other people. In Auschwitz, there were capos of other category. There were Jews. There were people who were good to the Jews, I understand.
I want to say that there were men who had certain functions, Jews or non-Jews, who were human, and not only that they were human, but they also had connections with the international underground.
There was an underground movement in the Auschwitz, at Auschwitz, I see.
When I arrived, there was a very complicated underground.
Did you belong to it?
International underground. I belonged to the Jewish division in the camp. Yes.
He was also among the people who had permanent connection with that underground.
President of court, this was, he was out of the camp.
He was not outside, but he was in such, doing such work that he was going out, and within the framework of his work, he was going out.
This was the witness who was a driver. Attorney General, yes, he was a Volksdeutsche. Judge Halevi, this was a mistake which we regret.
From Chekhanov, there were people who were also members of that clandestine brigade, and during the first stages, it dealt with mutual help and with distribution of some bread left, and also with the rescuing of those who were already considered as doomed. There were such possibilities here and there. They were dealing also with the supplying of medicines, because some people knew that when they went to a hospital he would never leave. This brigade was dealing with portioning easier work to people who were on the brink of becoming what was called Muslim at that time. There's a man who was completely washed up physically. But there was also a truly military program which was drawn up by former officers, members of political underground movements, Poles, Germans, sometimes Frenchmen as well. And we had a friend in that restricted military staff who was dealing with the preparation of the program.
Attorney General, since our time is limited, will you please describe briefly, President of Court, Mr. Hausner requested that we hear you today because you come from a distance. Mr. Hausner, we have only a few minutes. Will you please describe as brief as possible? There was a Sonderkommando at Auschwitz, an uprising which succeeded in part. Were you a member of the underground?
I had only an indirect connection with that particular mutiny. One day I was given, together with my friend Yehuda Laufer, who is now an inhabitant of Haifa, we were given an instruction to see to it that we should bring from the place where we were working, namely a tremendous factory, to bring explosives from there. This was extremely difficult because any movement within that factory was forbidden, and in that particular place where they were producing explosives, only Jewish girls were working, and they were under very strict control and supervision. We were trying through the instrumentality of one of our friends to whom we could speak. Her name was Hadassah Zlotnitska. We were trying through her intermediary to influence those girls that they should give us explosives, but we failed. And then a friend of ours was sent to Birkenau, and he was entrusted with the task of convincing our comrade Róża Robota to see to it that the girls give consent to take out the explosives and give them to us. They agreed, and from then almost every day those who brought food had a double tray, and in the tray we had small amounts of explosives which were brought to Auschwitz A. One particular incident occurred when I was standing near my friend. He told me that there was a search going on. He told me that he had no time to put the explosives in the saucers, and that the explosives are on his body in the cigarette packet. And I knew quite well that not only we would be killed as retaliation, but all the underground of Auschwitz was jeopardized. And when they carried out the search, they felt that I was trembling, and they then searched me very thoroughly, and when they didn't find anything, then they didn't really look at my friend. Somehow or other they skipped him. And since I was excited and I thought I was the one who had explosives and not him, after a certain time it transpired that Róża Robota is also giving explosives to Birkenau, and these explosives were handed over to Sonderkommando, and this was in the course of the largest transports from Hungary, at the time that we were breathing the smell of death all the time, that we would see the smoke going up from the chimney, the fatal smoke which we knew so well what it was. And after the transports had finished, then they began to use they were beginning to liquidate Sonderkommando because they were the witnesses of what was going on. They were the witnesses of these iniquities, and they were being murdered then. And Sonderkommando informed us that they were going to rise, and we were requested to bolster that uprising. We went to the underground movement telling them that we had tidings from our friends from Birkenau, and who told us that they had to start an uprising because they had no chance of survival. They had their own considerations, of course. They were also connected with outside movements of partisans, and they told us that we had to give them instruction not to do anything because they are jeopardizing everything. But in spite of everything, they did rise. I do not remember the date exactly, but I know that when the matter was examined, it was found out that it was on the 6th of November 1944. They blew up crematorium number 2. They killed some of the SS people and of the capos. They ran away and scattered in the surrounding area, and as far as I know, none of them remained alive. Immediately an alert was declared. Immediately search parties were sent after them, and I understand that all of them had been killed.
Please now be brief, Mr. Gutman. I understand that there was a special inquiry commission how this mutiny came to be, and as a result from this inquiry commission, Róża Robota was arrested and tortured in a very severe form. I only wish to put questions and request your answers. You were afraid that she might speak and reveal the underground movement. Then she requested through somebody, a messenger, Block Eldester, that Zabludowicz should come to see her, and he did come.
He did come.
She told him, "You have nothing to fear, I shall not speak."
Yes, it was written on a piece of paper. She sent to us that we have nothing to fear, that we should continue our work, that she knows quite well what was in store for her, and that other people are not involved.
And she was killed by hanging.
4 Jewish girls were executed. They were hanged, and the last word Róża uttered, all of them had to stand and see the execution and look. She said that vengeance would come.
You were taken from Auschwitz to Mauthausen until the 18th of January 1945. You were taken to Mauthausen.
I was taken into the death march. We were walking. This was in January 1945. We were moving in the direction of Mauthausen.
You came to Mauthausen, and this is where you were liberated.
I was brought to Mauthausen, and there I was liberated.
President of Court, Dr. Savatius, any questions? I have no questions. Judge Rave, no questions. Judge Halevi.